Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. We have a very special edition today after the budget, a budget which was greatly appreciated by the markets and the business community. Although the social sector players did say that it fell a little short of their expectations. So we have the Finance Secretary to analyze the budget, various aspects of the budget for us. Welcome to our show, Mr. Ashok Lavasa. So give us some broad ideas about what you think the budget has in store for various constituencies that it caters to. What's your sense?
If you see the budget, in fact this time the way the budget has been structured, the speech of the finance minister, it specifically addresses the requirements and the programs that pertain to certain segments like farmers or women or the rural areas, the youth particularly. So we have tried to make an assessment of what would be the requirement in terms of the development imperatives for these segments. What is the consistency of government policies pertaining to these segments or these sectors, and how we can allocate expenditure in a way in which there is greater consolidation of the development process.
Okay. So tell me, your government began the process of shifting a lot of decision making on expenditure to the states with that big decision under the 14th Finance Commission to give them an extra 10 percentage points of the total share of revenues, right? Now, after that, could you give us some sense of how is the transition happening? We get the sense that a lot of centrally sponsored schemes which were operating earlier and funding education, health, what have you, other social sector programs, now the states will be responsible to actually run some of those programs, design it for themselves. Now, can you just tell us how is that transition happening? Because it's very critical to the way the center and states work together to drive social sector programs.
You see, you're very right that the devolution formula, which was accepted as a result of the 14th Finance Commission recommendations, it devolves more resources to the states and thereby giving them greater elbow room, greater funds to deploy them in the schemes of their liking and their priority. At the same time, what Government of India did as a result of the recommendations which were made by the Chief Minister's Committee, which was headed by the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, many of the centrally sponsored schemes were re-engineered in the sense that there were some schemes in which Government of India's allocation remained 100%. There were many other schemes in which it was redesigned to be 60-40, and there are some other schemes in which it would be slightly different. So these 28 or 29 umbrella schemes, which are known as the centrally sponsored schemes, the implementation of these schemes is the responsibility of both the state governments and the Government of India. Okay. While it is quite normal for the states to expect that despite this additional devolution, they would obviously be happier if Government of India gave them more allocations.
Yeah, some top-ups on each.
That's right.
Under each heads, yeah.
But you see, after all, government resources are limited and they have to be deployed in centrally sponsored schemes. They have to be used for the central sector schemes, incidentally, which also get implemented in the states. Yeah, sure. So, for the central sector schemes, by and large, the states don't contribute any resources. In spite of this additional devolution to the states, if you see that Government of India's spending in this budget on centrally sponsored schemes itself has gone up.
It's gone up, okay.
Right. So it is not as if that because the
states, there was an expectation that they would go down since you had shifted increased the devolution.
That's right. So in spite of the fact that states will be contributing 40% in many of those schemes, the total funds which Government of India is deploying for these schemes has gone up. That is one. And also if you see the figures of the total transfers to states, that amount has also gone up by about 12% in this year.
So, can you give me an idea of the total number now through non-plan, through the tax devolution which goes to the states, and through the plan, the central plan process? Now, what percentage of the total kitty that you have actually goes to the states?
You see, this budget, the total size of the expenditure which is proposed is 21,47,000 crores. The devolution takes place as per a formula, which is based on the revenue receipts, and it is based on the direct taxes which are collected by the government. The total transfer to states would be of the order of about 10 lakh 20 or 30,000 crores. This will include some of the assistance which this Government of India gives to the states. That's right. Now, in all these resources which we plan, we also have to keep in mind the total borrowings which Government of India will effect. And when we determine our borrowings, we have to keep in view the fiscal deficit targets that we generally follow.
As per the roadmap, the FRBM roadmap.
So, on the fiscal deficit front, as is well known and as the Finance Minister brought out very amply, the Government of India has been following a path of fiscal discipline, fiscal prudence over the last several years. And there was a period in time where the FRBM limits had actually been breached. There was also a period when FRBM requirements were kept in abeyance. But over the last 3 years, you will find that in succeeding budgets, the fiscal deficit target has been brought down consistently. And what the government is very serious about is that it would stick to the commitment that it makes on fiscal deficit. So, like last year, we maintained 3.9, which was the declared fiscal deficit. In 2016-17, which is the current financial year, the target is 3.5, and government is hopeful that that target of fiscal deficit will be maintained. So, from 3.9, there has been a reduction of 0.4%. In 17-18, we have proposed that the fiscal deficit will be 3.2%. So, a further reduction of 0.3%.
There is Mr. Lavasa, there is a thought process, a debate even within the government that India, which is currently the government which is spending so much on infrastructure, public investment driven infrastructure, especially since private investment is still sluggish and yet to pick up. Should we not pause on on going down this fiscal roadmap in such a tight manner? And is there any harm if you had a fiscal deficit of say 3.5%? I'm just giving a rough number to drive some of the government public investment program, or even things like irrigation infrastructure. We need a lot of funding. A lot of government's flagship programs, this government's program, appear to be underfunded in the sense Har Khet Ko Pani, that big irrigation projects. Whether you take even Digital India, it requires taking optics fiber to some 250,000 panchayats. You have some money in the USO fund, but for the subsequent years you need money. So, do you think that some of these big programs, Digital India, social sector programs, rural infrastructure, we can manage with the 3% fiscal deficit target?
See, I'll deal with this question in two parts. One is the overall requirement of maintaining a fiscal deficit. And as you said, there is a view that a developing country like India should not be overly concerned by fiscal deficit.
Fundamentalist about a roadmap.
Right, you may call it fundamentalist, but there is a degree of discipline which the market expects. And even if you convert this into managing a household budget.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think that there are many people who would argue that when you run a household, you should borrow more than what you can
Pay. Repay later.
right?
Yeah.
And generally, if you borrow for consumption, then it is classified as a non-productive expenditure. But if you borrow for creation of assets, which will in turn yield greater revenue, which will help you in servicing your debt,
Yeah, yeah.
I think that kind of expenditure and that kind of borrowing is something which is
Still
sustainable.
justified, yeah.
It is sustainable, it is justified. It was in order to maintain this boundary of discipline that the FRBM Act was brought into being more than a decade back. And the good thing about the Indian financial management system is that not only the government of India but all the states have subjected themselves to this discipline. So which is, I think, good, and which is something which is appreciated
Fiscal prudence is always
the world over.
It's always appreciated, yeah.
But there has been a view that we need to revisit the FRBM Act and its provisions. It was with this in view that government constituted a committee last year under the chairmanship of Mr. N.K. Singh, and these experts were requested to go into the entire business of the provisions of FRBM Act, how successful it has been, whether there is a need to review some of its provisions and make a recommendation for the future. We've got the committee's report and we got it a few days before the presentation of the budget. So government will be examining the recommendations, but taking into account the development requirements, especially in the programs and schemes which government has launched and which are showing good results. A conscious decision was taken by the government this time that rather than go down to 3% fiscal deficit, which was what was the declared goal, we will go down to 3.2.
So you've slowed the pace of
Right.
lowering of fiscal deficit.
That's right. And we have actually adhered to what is known as a glide path.
Okay.
Even the FRBM panel in their recommendations have spoken about reaching 3%, then holding on to 3% for a few years, and then follow a path which is more gradualistic than 0.5%. So in that sense, the
So you're saying
decision,
it's already built into the FRBM, the roadmap.
so the decision which government has taken this time is to follow a more gradual path. We've demonstrated our commitment to fiscal discipline last 2-3 years, and we continue to follow that path, but we will also moderate it depending on the development commitments of the government.
Here I want to ask you one question. Going forward, it is a consolidation budget in terms of expenditure also, but going forward, there are many uncertainties. One uncertainty is, as the economic survey says, global headwinds are still there. I mean, there's no big global recovery. So we don't know at what rate our GDP will grow. And we are also coming out of demonetization, and this again survey says that some of the risks of demonetization may spill over to 2018. Then there's a third risk, which is implementation of GST. We don't know how that will pan out in the short run. There is a fear that the center may have committed a lot more to the states. In fact, center has, I guess, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, given a minimum commitment to the states that their revenues won't fall below certain level. So given these risks, do you think that next year you may have to accept one of the recommendations of the FRBM committee, which says that in the event of an emergency, you may have to relax the fiscal deficit figure by 0.5%. Is that a possibility?
Well, we will have to look at it when we examine the recommendations in their entirety. So, what are the circumstances in which the escape clause, as it is called, can be used? What is the manner of utilizing that clause? Who can recommend the usage of that clause? So all those things will have to be gone into.
All those things are not known yet, is it?
Right. Those contain, they are contained in the report. So we'll have to look at the report and all its recommendations and then take a call. But having said that, I do entirely agree with you that this budget had several challenges. And whether they are on the domestic front or on the international front, these challenges are there before us, they are well known, and government has to brace itself up and take measures which are required to meet these challenges. The uncertainty which you mentioned, which is associated with the revenue.
Yeah, domestic recovery, GST, right? And the global recovery.
That's right.
There are three big challenges here.
That's right. So it is keeping all these things in view that the main focus of this budget was that how do you plan your expenditure in a way that it gives a push to the development effort, particularly in the rural areas, and also give a fillip to the agriculture sector, which this year is forecast to grow at about 4%. So there is a certain recovery that is seen in the agriculture sector, and government wanted to spend more money both in schemes which are going on, which are directly related to agriculture and allied sectors. For example, take the Krishi Sinchai Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, or the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. We have made additional allocation in these. There is a 10 lakh crore credit, agriculture credit target which has been kept. Apart from this, in the allied sectors, we've given more money for fisheries, we've given more money for dairy. So both the white and the blue revolution have got greater allocations.
So seeing that agriculture is on the uptrend, you're trying to push it further with.
That's right. So, and it is not only in terms of giving more money, but it is also in undertaking certain reform measures in the rural areas in the agriculture sector, expanding the ENAM or making a law, a model law for contract farming. These are some of the measures which have been announced, apart from, for example, creating a dairy development fund of 8,000 crores, which is meant to revamp the milk processing centers, etc. So that was the
thrust. Okay.
That was the thrust.
And although there is one complaint that comes from agriculturists, which is that the most essential thing for farmers is a certain assured increase in MSPs, incomes. So what they are getting, their returns over the total costs. I still remember the Prime Minister has promised that by 2022 their incomes will double. Now, are they getting? Do you think they are getting reasonable returns? Because the farmers, what we are getting from below, feedback seems to suggest that they are not getting enough returns over their costs in several segments of food grains, crops, etc.
I think as far as the minimum support price is concerned, you know that there is a very well established mechanism for determining what the MSP would be. So the CACP does that exercise for different crops, and government has been taking into account their recommendations, sometimes even improving on their recommendations.
And getting more products, more crops into the
MSP.
On paper there are some 35 items, but in reality it works only for 4 or 5.
And also one should take into account, for example, the electricity which is supplied to the agriculture sector is heavily subsidized by in all the states. The fertilizer subsidy is given. In many cases, the seeds, etc., are made available. So there is an entire element of making available inputs that are given, so that government can then give a reasonable MSP to the farmers. Take the case of pulses this year. I think it was on account of the very attractive minimum support price announced for pulses that you see such a huge increase in the production of pulses.
Tell me, one of the big pieces which comes directly under your supervision in the budget is restructuring of expenditure. Although your overall expenditure growth, as I see it, it's about 6.5%. It's not, overall expenditure growth is not so much. In real terms, it would be about 2.5%. But within that, I get the feeling that you're doing a lot of restructuring, redirecting of expenditure from some heads to other heads, the more important heads, as you just suggested. In this context, the Prime Minister made a very interesting statement in Parliament, where he said that you're using the direct benefit transfer system to directly put money into the accounts of the people, so that you save on the leakages of some of the subsidies. Now, he mentioned this figure of 32 crore accounts. 1,55,000 crore have gone into 32 crore accounts so far in several schemes. Many of them are centrally sponsored schemes. Now, is this the beginning, or what is the scope for how much more can you put in the direct benefit transfers? And in this context, I also want to ask you whether all the Jan Dhan accounts, for instance, have been seeded, have got Aadhaar linkages, because I'm told that about 26% have still not got Aadhaar linkages. And again, another related problem, if we were to sort of service people in far off villages, the banking correspondents, about 150, 1,50,000 banking, do they have the infrastructure to reach those villages and service these accounts?
I think all the issues that you mentioned,
I mean, these are all linked issues.
They are
right?
very, very relevant. So let me deal with them one by one. The two distinguishing feature of this budget in terms of expenditure is, one, priority in allocations to certain schemes, certain sectors where we see a great momentum of implementation and where we hope to even complete some of the schemes. The second thing is that how do you achieve greater efficiency of expenditure? By improved governance. So let me deal with the first part first. Which are the sectors? Overall, this budget, as you mentioned, there is an increased expenditure allocation of 1,68,000 crores. And most of this money is an additionality to the rural development and agriculture and allied and social sectors, and also about 30-35% is the increase for infrastructure areas. In the rural development sector, for example, what is the government thrust on? One is the direct employment benefit scheme of Manrega, where we have increased the allocation from 37,500 crore to 48,000 crores. So it's a very substantial increase. But if you come to the other segments, I have already mentioned agriculture allied, I am not repeating them. But if you come to, let's say, the Pradhan Mantri Gramin Sadak Yojana, 19,000 crores allocated for that. The rural housing, the Pradhan Mantri Gramin Awas Yojana, from 15,000 crore it has gone up to 23,000 crores. So both housing and rural connectivity, rural drinking water supply has got a big boost. In fact, there is a separate program initiated for 2,800 villages which are arsenic affected. Now, quite apart from this, there is a BharatNet program which takes telephone connectivity to the remote villages. You mentioned that in your comments. We want to complete this program. We want to complete the electrification of rural villages in 2018-19. So there is higher allocation in all these programs. The second part is the DBT that you mentioned, the Aadhaar seeding. And that is where I come to the efficiency of expenditure.
My sense is that is very underfunded. The infrastructure to reach all the accounts.
But you see, for example, BharatNet, we have given 10,000 crores additionality to the Department of Telecom so that we can try and complete this program to the extent possible. And I think this is a big boost. This execution of this program is on a very sound footing. Through this, the DBT, the public finance management system, all this will succeed only if you have a reliable and robust connectivity. By the application of DBT in many of the schemes, 84 schemes are already on DBT. There are many more which have been identified, and there is a timetable by which there is a...
is the time frame by which you know that you will reach out to all these accounts through the banking public sector bank and their banking correspondents, because they need a motorcycle, they need a handheld ATM, These are all capital costs. Have those allocations been made?
See, different schemes have different calendars and different pace of implementation. For example, the fair price shop. Already 1,77,000 fair price shops have POS machines installed. Most of them are Aadhaar enabled, and there is a program by which all PDS shops will get these this infrastructure. Similarly, the fertilizer depots, they are getting this infrastructure. The banks themselves have ordered more than 1 million POS machines. The banking correspondents are being given the handheld micro ATM.
So the infrastructure will be in place very soon.
But one very big thing which I think we should take note of is the India Post Payment Bank. So it was already announced by the government that the postal payment bank will be
as a delivery mechanism. Yeah.
No, there is
Platform.
a post payment bank which has been set up. 2 branches were inaugurated in January, and the target of the government is that every district should have a post payment bank by September. Now, the moment the post payment bank comes into operation, you will find that there are 1,53,000 post offices in this country. 1,35,000 of them are in the rural areas. These 1,35,000 post offices have about 2,70,000 Gramin Dak Sevaks. So all these Gramin Dak Sevaks who are well recognized in the rural areas, who are already in touch with the
so they'll have comfort
masses,
level. People will have comfort level. In dealing with
they can work as banking correspondents. So I think the reach is going to increase phenomenally. But let me also tell you about one more thing which is bringing about greater efficiency of expenditure, and that is the public finance management system. This is a platform by which we are gradually moving towards reducing the time taken to transfer money to the states, to the districts, to the ultimate user of this money. And once you reduce the time taken, it also brings down the money which keeps lying in the pipeline without being utilized. So that brings down the float, and thereby it helps government in better financial management.
Thank you very much for talking to us, Mr. Ashok Lavasa. You've given us a good idea of how the government is going to reach out to the vast number of people with various welfare programs. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.